An extraordinary book, intriguing. It talks about the good, bad, and ugly, a complex historical assessment of Western colonialism. Is colonialism morally equivalent to slavery? And I think you adeptly put that to rest as well.
Well, it can't be because I mean, what the anti-Western polemicists want to make us do is to focus myopically on
Mm-hmm.
the 150 years in which some British were involved in slave trading and slavery, mainly the West Indies, from about 1650 to the early 1800s, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as I've said, the British were among the first peoples in the history of the world to abolish what was hitherto a universal phenomenon of slave
Exactly.
trading and
Yeah.
slavery. And then the second part of the empire's life was spent suppressing slavery from Vancouver Island to New Zealand, to India, across Africa to Brazil. So, no, you can't equate colonialism with slavery because the second half of British colonialism was devoted to
Mm-hmm.
anti-slavery.
Yeah.
And the Hudson Bay Company on Vancouver Island sought, without success, I think, to discourage slave raiding and slavery in the Pacific Northwest. But
No,
in order
it's
in order to
truly
do that,
remarkable.
in order to do that, you'd have to change the whole of the economy, which happened over time. Happily now, Indigenous peoples don't rely on slave raiding and slave trading to survive. They don't have to.
Well, for me, it was quite a revelation to, you know, I'm certainly very familiar with, um, William Wilberforce and leaders in the anti-slavery movement. But I think your book shone a powerful light on the scale and scope and commitment of the British Empire against slavery. And you even talk in great detail about, from naval records, the amount of ships and personnel who even died trying to shut down slavery from Brazil to, well, Vancouver Island, everywhere. Um, I was astounded by that story. Were you shocked by that as well?
Oh, well, I knew something of it, but not even I knew the full extent of it. So yes, I mean, in the 1840s or thereabouts, the Royal Navy devoted over 13% of its manpower
Hmm.
to stationing ships off the coast of West Africa to interrupt the slave trade with Brazil. And then throughout the 19th century, there were attempts in West Africa, South Africa, East Africa to suppress the Arab slave trade.
Hmm.
And this, according to calculations, this cost the British taxpayer a lot of money over 50. Well, certainly it's very hard to calculate what it cost in terms of money because it was worldwide and it lasted 150 years. But it's been calculated that in the 50 years after the abolition of the slave trade, 1807, the British spent more money suppressing the slave trade than they had earned in the previous 50 years from slave trading and
Hmm.
slavery. And there are a couple of American political scientists who reckon that the suppression of the transatlantic slave trade alone was one of the most expensive moral endeavors in modern history.
Hmm. So, why would the British Empire make that such a priority to deal with the slave trade? I mean, it just seemed like it cost enormous of money and even lives to be able to uphold that kind of position. Why would they do that?
Yeah, well, this will surprise lots of people, but um, imperialists can sometimes be motivated by humanitarian and liberal concerns,
Hmm.
in the same way that contemporary progressive people want to use international bodies to promote human rights. Well, in the up until the second end of the Second World War, there were no international bodies. The nearest you got to it were empires.
Hmm.
So what happened was there seems to have been something of a moral revolution in Britain and also in Denmark, to France to some extent, and in New England, where people decided that the hitherto universal institution of slavery and slave trading, that these institutions were morally abhorrent. And as you know, Wilberforce and his colleagues lobbied for 50 years to get both the trade and the institution abolished within the British Empire. That's the best part of a lifetime in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And they were inspired. The elite perhaps was inspired by Enlightenment philosophy. Other people were inspired by evangelical Christianity, particularly John Wesley and such like. And so evangelical Christianity was a major motivating force in much imperial endeavor in the 1800s. And even when it looked as if slavery had been largely abolished, at least across the Atlantic, in 1837 in London, the Society for the Protection of Aboriginal Peoples was founded because it had been observed that the impact of modern European colonization on Australian Aboriginals was very grievous, and there was a concern to try and moderate that.